And I would just say to people, you got to plan ahead. 45 years old and retirement seems like it's 100 years away. It may be a lot sooner than you think. I would start thinking about, especially if you see age discrimination in your field. And not every field has it, and maybe your company doesn't have it, but look around if you got to get another job and understand that. Because I was at companies that didn't really have it, but I was at companies that earlier on that had it, and I saw it. You don't get in a bubble and think because you're at company XYZ and you haven't 48 years old or 53 years old, you can keep going, because they could be bought out. A lot of things can happen. Plan ahead and then ramp up at the best you can, and seek out mentors and people to help you, because the people will help you.
Welcome to the Repurpose Your Career podcast, brought to you by Career Pivot. This podcast is where those of us in the second half of life come together to discuss how to repurpose our careers for the 21st century. Come listen to career experts give you proven strategies. Listen to people like you tell their stories on how they repurpose their careers. And finally, get your questions answered. Your host, Mark Miller, has made 6 career pivots over the last 30 years. He understands this is not about jumping out of the frying pan into a fire, but rather to create a plan where you make clear, actionable steps or pivots to a better future career. Are you ready to repurpose your career?
Welcome to episode 244 of the Repurpose Your Career podcast. My name is Mark Miller, and I'll be your host every Monday for a discussion on what it's like to repurpose your career. This week, I'm speaking with Pierre Fricke, who is a member of the Career Pivot membership community. I actually worked with Pierre back in the 1990s when both of us were at IBM. Pierre has an Encore career that goes back to his childhood, buying and selling vintage money. His website is buyvintagemoney.com, and I want you to hear his story because he saw ageism occurring when he himself was still quite young. He cultivated this business on the side for decades. You will hear that he has a real passion for this area, and he can continue to do this for as long as he likes. I specifically want some of my younger listeners to take note of this episode. However, before we get to the episode, let's have a word from our sponsor, Career Pivot. The Career Pivot membership community continues to help the members who are participating in this project grow and thrive. This is a community where everyone is there to help everyone else figure out what to do in the second half of life and then make it happen. Let's hear what Debbie had to say about being part of the community.
I think the main things I'm getting out of the community are accountability and support. Just getting on every week and talking with people from the What's Next group and seeing the same people every week, watching everyone else's progress kind of motivates me to do more, and also feeling like, yeah, there are other people out there that are watching, and just motivates me to keep moving on my journey. And I also paired up with an accountability partner, and we have calls every other week. And so we've been looking over each other's resumes and just talking about, what we plan to do, what we're enjoying, what we're not enjoying. So I think just having somebody there to bounce ideas around with is really helpful. And also, I think as I've gone through this journey with the people in the What's Next group, we're getting to know each other. I feel like I'm getting great feedback from everybody because they can see things that I can't see. It's also nice to have people who are cheering you on, and they're going to cheer you on through your successes, and they're going to help you through your failures, and you're going to learn from other people's experiences.
I'm recruiting new members. If you are interested in learning more about the endeavor, please go to careerpivot.com/community. Now, on to my discussion with Pierre Fricke. Welcome to the Repurpose Your Career podcast. I have the real joy of having my friend Pierre Fricke on the podcast, who has a real interesting Encore career that's been going on for a long time. So, Pierre, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
I actually knew Pierre 25 years ago or longer at IBM?
In the late 90s, for sure, or mid 90s, maybe actually probably longer, probably the earlier 90s. I was in Somers in the late 90s. It was Austin in the early mid 90s.
So, Pierre, what have you done in your career?
Well, let's start at the beginning, I guess. It's interesting. I went to school in New Orleans at Tulane University. In high school, I was buying and selling rare coins and paper money. That was a hobby that my grandmother got me started at 8 years old. As a collector, my parents took an interest in it. We actually had a small business when I was a teenager, or 12, 13, 14. My first job was working for a coin dealer at $1 per hour in 1973, roughly, sorting coins and stuff. And so, I had that exposure to that stuff. And then as we were dealing and my parents were dealing, I kind of had a case on the table and I was buying and selling at 12, 13. And I just remember buying something, finding a deal for $12 that was kind of a find and selling it for $70 on the same bourse floor that same day. And in 1973 to a 12-year-old, $70 is a lot of money. And so it was kind of thrilling. It was kind of a thrill. Plus these things are historical. There's a lot of history behind this stuff. So I got involved in that as a teenager and actually worked my way through high school into college, buying and selling coins of paper money up until 19. I did some restaurant work and stuff. I did some jobs that really motivated me to consider college. I was actually thinking about being a full-time coin dealer when I was 18, but I realized I should go get a degree. I could always make choices on that later. The beautiful thing about these hobbies is that you can always do them later. Whereas, you pass up the time for a degree, it gets harder later. So I went to the route to get a degree. It came down to petroleum engineering, chemical engineering, or computer science engineering. And the oil and chemical industry kind of was booming. And I just saw a coin crash. There was a rare coin silver gold bust in 1980. If you remember the gold and the Hunt brothers and all that. And I got an education in bubbles pretty early. And I saw the same thing happening in oil. So chemi can be other things besides oil, but in Louisiana, it was oil. So I decided to go computer engineering. It seemed like it was the future, which it is and was. It's still, we're in the future. So I went to a computer engineering degree and worked coins on the side into college until the bust. And the bust, I had to go get a job. And I'd go to a show and I'd drive over to Houston and I'd go to a show and make, $200, $400, $500 in a weekend in 1979. That would be like a month's worth of work part-time. And that was great because I didn't have to work except doing that. And until 1980, 1980, the market crashed in the spring. By June 1980, I got a job at Miller Brewing Company in the distributorship in New Orleans at $3.75 an hour, which was above minimum wage by some margin. But working at $3.70 an hour, it seemed like I got out of a speedboat, and now is rowing a raft with a rowboat in terms of how fast you could make money. And but that's what you did because I lost a lot of my capital. I made a lot of money. I lost a lot of it back, and got another education in a second bubble pretty early on. But that market recovered. I mean, things go up and down. That market recovered as I was going through college, but I stayed with Miller Brewing Company. It was kind of I learned about office work, office politics. Most of the people were good. I didn't really have any problem. I wasn't bucking for promotions and stuff, but you got an interesting view into the office world as a college student doing that. And there's nothing like counting, doing the inventory in the warehouse on Saturday morning after a Friday night out partying, like counting cases of beer the next morning. But that was fun. But I had a choice of going to IBM in Austin, IBM Boca Raton, Texas Instruments. There was a couple other places. There's a little company called Microsoft. This is 1983. But I wasn't going to go to these little companies. I wanted to stay closer to home. I didn't really hear of Microsoft. I mean, I heard of Microsoft because of DOS, but there was I don't know if Compaq existed quite yet. I think it did, but whatever. I went to IBM in Austin and started working on AIX as a software programmer. So I started that in 1983. I was one of the first hires into that had Unix background. A lot of the IBMers were retraining themselves on Unix, but I actually came in as a junior person that knew Unix already. So that helped a lot. I moved through various technical and product management roles early on. I got into management fast. I was a manager 5 years in to my career, first line manager, managing compilers for AIX and vendor relationships and stuff like that. It was a great organization, a great team. I was also then, I went to a communications team, did some stuff there, became a second line manager, did a couple of second line jobs. One of my best jobs was managing the AIX based operating system as a second line manager. I had various numbers of departments, but up to 7 departments with 100 people during AIX in 92, 91, 93, during the PowerPC days. And that was a lot of fun. It was a great team of people. I learned a lot about management. I did the management stuff for a while. Then there was an opportunity to help. I did some strategy work when Gerstner came on board, representing AIX to the Gerstner task forces. Got to learn about IBM's structure, and then moved up to Somers to work on various projects. I was the guy that led the cross-functional team to figure out what we do with Microsoft NT after OS2 died. I was a core team member on getting IBM into open source and Linux in the late 90s. IBM was a great place to be, but it had changed quite a bit. And there was things going on that Bo, said to me that this isn't going to be my father's IBM. It's going to be very hard to run this to the end game, which would have been in 2010 sometime. And, pension disappeared. I was under 40. I was gone 6 months later. And I went into an industry analyst firm. I went from 300,000 person company to a 30-person company. That's a big shock. Backing up along the way, I got back into coins as a collector and part-time dealer during this period. It was kind of a sidebar thing, just dabbling in it periodically. In the late 90s, I put it aside when we moved to New York because we had to sell everything to buy a house in New York. Industry analyst thing in the early 00s was fun. I worked for a company called D.H. Brown, a 30-person firm that had IBM as a customer and other people's as a customer. And we had a manufacturing product lifecycle vertical that I got involved in. Learned a lot about middleware. I became a middleware person there. And I met a lot of interesting people around the industry. That if you want to get a view of an industry, at least this high-tech industry, I can't speak for others. I imagine there might be equivalents. Become an industry analyst and you get to meet all the places people you might want to work. It's a great networking opportunity. I got to know a lot of people, one of which was a gentleman by the name of Mark Fleury, who founded JBoss. And, I threw my name in the hat in late 04 because it was open source middleware application development. They brought me in early 05 as employee 104 or so. And so I got my vision of being part of a startup, which is another thing I wanted to do. So we were there for a year and a half. Red Hat bought us. I ran another 8.5 years, starting as an individual contributor and managing a team of 8 product marketers. I was product management, product marketing, and then product marketing through that whole period. And the JBoss business grew from, single million, ARR to, 9 figures in that time. It was a pretty spectacular run, and Red Hat was a great place to be. Red Hat was the closest thing to IBM of the 1960s with the subscription model and everything. And it was a pretty stable environment, actually. After a while, so in this time frame, let me back up a little bit. When I was an industry analyst, before I joined JBoss in 03, we had some cuts. We had to take some pay cuts. There was a big bust in the industry. If you remember 01, 02, 03, it was really rough. I decided that I don't have any control over any of this stuff. I realized that these people could do whatever they want to do to me, basically. I had gotten more reacquainted myself with the coins and now paper money business, the Civil War era, which I had an interest in of the old United States history, as well as from the beginning to the Civil War era. And so I got involved in that, collecting some of that paper money at first. And then in 03, I decided to become a dealer again. And I did that because of a couple of 3 things. One is I saw what would happen at some of these bigger companies about what they were doing with their over 50 crowd. And I said, that's me in 10 years. Number 2, I saw, the layoffs and the cutbacks. I saw it was interesting what was going on. And the owner of D.H. Brown was a great guy, and I really owe him a lot. But he treated the people that were in their 30s and 40s differently than he treated the people in their 50s and 60s. And I saw that too. Now I was in my 40s, so I was in the group that had better treatment. But I said, well, that's me in 10 years. Again, I said, And so I said, I got to start something else to make up for this cut that I received, and not just me, but the team received. I went and did something about it, and started buying and selling paper money. Met some interesting people in the industry. There was a guy who took me under his wing, Randy Shipley, who God rest his soul. He passed away 2.5 years ago, but he helped me a great deal. There's others. I don't want to name them all, but I would say he was probably the most influential. That was really important because, jumping into that without getting an understanding of the inside, how these businesses work on the inside. And it's not just your business, it's the network of people. It's the collectors, it's the dealers. The dealers are competitors, but they're also partners. You also buy and sell amongst yourselves. There's a whole, code of ethics. There's a whole raft of things you need to learn. That's much different than a company with an HR department with management structures and rules and regulations. I mean, you don't have an HR department. You have sort of unspoken rules of conduct, but you quickly follow the legal system if you screw up. And believe me, you don't want to tangle with the legal system. The legal system is going to cost you a minimum of $10K, and it could quickly get to six figures. And you want to avoid that. And there's no HR department. You might get mediation, but there's no HR department to shield you from any of that stuff. So there's a lot to learn. And these people really helped me a great deal in the OOs. And so I grew. I went, I was doing this part-time on the side, using my vacation to go to a few shows and meet people and set up and maybe get a case on this other guy's table. And I'd probably had, maybe I had $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of inventory, and I'd make, I don't know, $10,000, $20,000 the first couple of years. That was nice. I made up for my pay cut, actually. And it really didn't take that much time. I had 4 weeks of vacation or 3 weeks, 4 weeks of vacation, and we used it for that. Anyway, you move forward going into J. Boss and Red Hat. I kept that going on the side. It got bigger. My wife was working in retail as a manager, working stupid hours, and her income was stacked on top of mine, which didn't really make sense as we got that bigger. It didn't make sense anymore. So she left the retail industry in 2010, which, you had this other phenomenon going with her with Amazon coming in and hammering, amongst other things. And she worked at Bloomingdale's in Atlanta, and then 6 months later it closed after she left. So I told her, I said, you don't need to work anymore, or you can work, but you can help me with this. As we build it up bigger and bigger, it's going to be too much for me to do and maintain. And I got to give my priority to the high tech jobs over this stuff, because I owe that to the teams. I owe that to the people. So I always maintain that thing, that this second business was always a secondary thing. And the fact that we owned it meant I had no obligations to employees. You can't have a second business with obligations to employees and work for somebody else. It's one thing to do your own thing, but if you're going to start hiring employees, you got to go do that full time, because you have another set of obligations. But we didn't have that. So my wife became, she wasn't an employee, she was a co-owner. She actually did a bunch of the work. J. Boss and Red Hat were rolling along real nicely, and we kept building the business up. In 2015, we had built the business up. I felt comfortable leaving 15, even in the face of potential, I left a stable position, even in the face of potential risk, because we had built it up enough to where we could fall back on it if we needed to in 15, and replace most of the income we had as a director in a high tech company, which that's not trivial. By this time, we were selling, 6 figures worth of stuff every year at decent respectable profit. So she kept it going. I joined another company in the database market, Enterprise DB, ran there for a couple of years. That's where I got my first taste of private equity and cutbacks and much less. It was a good company and good people. I really enjoyed my time there, but it wasn't like Red Hat or old IBM. It was much more this new world that I had experienced a bit at the analyst firm, and it was the same sort of thing with more turnover and more change faster. Leaving there in 17, I was on my own. And I remember coming home telling my wife, it's the end of the game. We got a little bit of severance here. And she was stunned. And I kind of said, this is great, because we're going to go make this thing real. I mean, it is real. We're going to make it really real. And we did. It took 6 months to double it. I went from doing it, 10 hours a week to 50 hours a week or whatever. And we doubled it in 6 months because that additional oomph. We doubled the size of the revenue cash flow in 6 months, and that got us to independence, basically. But I was kind of, looking around. I interviewed during that time. It took my time interviewing. I didn't want to leave high tech yet, because once you leave high tech for a couple of plus years, you're done. So I did some consulting on the side, mostly micro engagements through the GLG platforms and stuff like that. I did a little bit of other stuff, an advisor to a company, a small, tiny little company. And that was all fun. That was good. And then my friend, I had some former Red Hat colleagues that called me into Rackspace. We were going to move down to Austin or Hill Country or area to retire anyway, out of Massachusetts. So why not? I mean, let's go to Rackspace. Now, Rackspace is a great heritage, a great company. It also was a private equity thing going through its own changes, which I saw within the first year I was there. But I had a lot of fun. I rolled that for 3.5 years until this summer, and 6 weeks ago. And we kept the coin paper money business going. Interestingly enough, it didn't really shrink very much during that time, even though I had to scale my time way back. It didn't shrink that much. My wife was really helping, a lot. We had a routine going. We became very well known in the hobby, in the coin and paper money hobby. I wrote some books along the way that helped. We're well known. We've got a really strong reputation. I like to say I'm able to actually have someone at a show bring me a $250,000 collection, and on a signed piece of paper and a handshake, they give it to me to sell for them. That's a high level of trust. That is something that I take pride in maintaining, that's what it takes. There's variations of that theme in other kinds of businesses, but that's what you want to be able to do to lead or be a significant player in some niche thing or some bigger thing or whatever it might be. So, I mean, that's kind of the journey in a nutshell, rolling through stuff. And I know I've talked a long time. Let me stop there and let's talk about the different points you might want to bring up.
Quick interruption. If you are enjoying this podcast, please rate it and review it on whatever podcast player you are using. And more importantly, would you mind telling a friend? Thanks, and back to the podcast episode. How old are you, Pierre?
60.
60. So you're going to retire?
Well, I'm in retirement 2.0. The 2017 to the 15 months of 17, 18 was retirement 1.0. This is 2.0. Whether this is final or not, I don't know yet. I have poked around a little bit, even in a few weeks I've had a couple of interviews, and there's a couple of people I've got to catch up with in the near future here. This is one possibility or two. And if it makes sense, we'll go do another round, and then there might be a retirement 3.0. On the other hand, if it doesn't make sense, and sense really means it's fun, it's going to be a fun place to work. The compensation will make sense for the time I have to put into it, overall. Because now it's interesting with trade-offs I got to make. It's not like I really need a job. It's more like it's someplace I want to go work and really be passionate about. But I will also then constrain this other business, which is probably as big as the paycheck they're going to give me in terms of profitability. So so it's got to be fun and cool, and I'll go do it. There's AI topics, there's integration things, there's IoT things. There's these hot topics that if you get the right type of opportunity in product marketing, most likely leadership, then I certainly would go do it. I'd go do it with full bore, because once you jump into that pool, you got to commit to them. My wife would run this other stuff, and I'd help periodically, and we'd go from there. But if that doesn't materialize, we're gonna build this up further, and at some point, it might be big enough to where it wouldn't make sense for me to go back into high tech. That's kind of, so right now I'm in 2.0. We'll see if there's a 3.0.
Explain what's your business right now. What are you buying and selling, and where are you making your money?
So I deal in early American coins and paper money, basically. So I deal in coins from the copper, pennies and half cents. They used to make half cents in the United States up to 1857. I deal in that stuff from 1787 to 1850s. I deal in some Civil War coins. Then I deal in Civil War currency, Confederate and Union, both. And then I deal in obsolete banknotes, because before the Civil War, the federal government didn't issue paper money. The banks did. And so there's thousands of different designs. There's some of the most beautiful money compared to today's bland money. It's actually spectacularly beautiful money. A lot of it's very rare. These are very interesting markets. And so basically I buy stuff at auctions. I buy stuff, people sell me their collection. I buy, estates come up. I take consignments, and I operate on a fee for selling it. So if I sell something for $1,000, you get X, and you'll get most of it, but I'll get a piece of it, kind of a deal. So I make money on, I buy something for, $100 and I sell it for $130. I buy something for $10,000, I sell it for $12,000. Or I get lucky and maybe there's something that falls through the cracks at auction, or, some dealer wants to sell a bunch of stuff and there's something really good in there. And sometimes you can make a much higher profit margin. Most of the time, not. Sometimes you lose. Sometimes you buy something for $1,000 and you have to sell it for 800. You don't want too many of those, but that happens to us. The speed, like I said, every business has speed bumps. And so that's really what it is. And you got to bring together a set of knowledge of the technical aspects and the historical aspects of this stuff. And you got to bring together a knowledge of networking with people. And these businesses are very people oriented. All businesses are people oriented, but this business, you might think, is very people oriented in terms of selling stuff to people, knowing what they want, knowing how to deal with people when they sell you stuff, knowing how to run on eBay or other venues online, and all the nuances of that, both technically as well as, and I don't mean technical like programming, but putting stuff on eBay, what's the rules and regulations for doing that, and taxes and all that stuff, as well as, you get people that are dissatisfied periodically, although I'm a conservative grader and all that. So I offer people good deals on things as best I can. And I don't get into the shenanigans that some people do where they have more problems. That being said, there's always problem customers. I'm in the part of the field where it's less of that because they're more historically inclined, but the people that buy and sell silver bullion and stuff, I'll leave that to them. That's a much bigger market. Much bigger market, but it gets some great people, and it also gets the people that go nuts, and it's kind of interesting on that front. But it's really, you got to network, you got to work with people. I'm trying to be the best salesperson I could be. That's not my center of gravity historically, but I am a salesperson. My wife managed salespeople at retail, so I guess I've got a manager that manages me and trains me on sales pretty good.
How many trade shows a year do you go to, or how many do you want to go to?
It's early on. I could only go to 6, 7, 8 of these things. These things were Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday. That's the kind of stuff you're looking at. So you're traveling Wednesday night. You have 2 days of vacation. So early on, I did 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of these things that chewed up 3 weeks or 4 weeks of vacation with maybe a side. We saved some for Christmas or whatever. As I got more vacation, and Rackspace was very generous with the vacation. We had 6.5 weeks of vacation, so I was able to do probably about 15 where I got on planes, and we were able to do 6 or so local kind of things, Friday, Saturday, or just Saturday. You don't need vacation locally. So that gets you up to about 20 or 22. I'm kind of in that 20 to 25 range. That basically means about half the weekends of the year. I don't want to really do more than that. Half the weekends of the year is 26. So that would be about my max. I might pull back because the online thing is going pretty well too.
So what do you enjoy about being at the shows?
Well, so I got a contract. So a lot of stuff goes on online, but you're sitting here in this office where I'm sitting, by yourself or with your wife or whatever. And while you might interact with people like this or on the phone, that kind of thing, it's not the same as seeing people face to face. So, there's a lot of people just want to run a lot of stuff online, but I got to get out and see people. And, that sort of substitutes for the office environment or the trade show environment, high tech. You get to eat out and see different things and go to get-togethers and stuff in the evening. Sometimes there's little celebrations or, a bunch of people get together. Like I said, these the dealers are competitors, but they're also friends. You go out with them and you chat about this, that, or the other thing, and you find out what's going on in the industry and network. Because, sometimes they may have a deal they can't do, but they'll give it to you. That kind of stuff. So it's really the people aspect of it. It's getting away from being in front of this device that we're sitting here in front of right now. And, that makes a lot of difference. And I think that's important for anything. I mean, if you're thinking about online businesses and stuff in your second act or your first act, even, you got to think about the people connections of this thing and not just through Zoom.
Say this is retirement 2.0 and there's no more job. How long do you see you continuing to do this?
Well, the beauty about this is high tech and a lot of different industries, high tech, finance. I don't want to go down all the list, but there's a pretty good number of industries that aren't particularly friendly to its upper middle aged, above 50. Now, there are some that are, and there are companies within every industry that are. And I happen to work for 3 of them, the last 3 I worked for, that were good for that kind of thing, I didn't see ageism and stuff at the companies I worked for in the last, since I've been 50, which is 3 different companies. I remember talking to, I'm going to tell a short story. I remember talking to one of the leaders of patriarchs, whatever you want to call them, of numismatics, which is coins and paper money collecting and dealing. His name was Eric Newman. He was 99 years old or 100, and I was 49 or 50. And this is some, 10 years ago or whatever. And I went to his he had the Eric Newman Money Museum in St. Louis. I went to his museum one year and I went to his house another year. I remember sitting in the museum after we went through a bunch of the stuff, and the guy had 6-9 figures worth of stuff, hundreds of million, over $100 million of stuff. I didn't go through all of it. I went through the Civil War stuff and some of that. Anyway, we were talking after, and he said, "Pierre, you seem to be concerned about prices a lot more than I was." And I said, "Well, Eric, you used to buy things in the 30s and 1940s and 50s, and you were paying 25 cents and 50 cents and $1 and maybe $5 and maybe $100 for something really expensive. And those same things now I'm paying $100 and $500 and $10,000 and $20,000 for. So the numbers are a lot bigger, number one." I said, "Number two, I'm in high tech, and high tech has been great to me, and I just foresee some more, but it's not particularly friendly to its upper middle age. And I've got to think about retirement at some point, or dealing with that." And he reached over so he's a 100-year-old guy. He reached over and grabbed my arm, like really firm. It's, "Pierre, the secret to retirement is don't retire." And I said, "Yeah, but I don't have a pension. And I got 401k. He says, "Yeah, but you got numismatics. And the good thing about this is, and you're doing well. And the good thing about this is, the older you get, as long as you maintain your health, the more valuable you are in terms of the community valuable, not monetary valuable, although that could be too, but in terms of the community actually respects you more as the older you get in this world." And that really struck me pretty hard. And I said, this is the right place to be, because eventually I'm going to be 60 and 70. The guy was 100 years old. He stopped traveling in his upper 90s. I know dealers in their 80s still going, I don't know. I could go as long as I want, as long as I maintain health. Probably won't be doing 25 shows at 75 or 80, but maybe 10 or whatever. I got to be able to put those 50-pound bags in the overhead bin, which probably have to become 25-pound bags at some point. But I can go as long as I want. And I can take breaks, go on vacations and things. And you got some pretty good flexibility and freedom.
The reason I wanted Pierre on this podcast is he's passionate about this stuff, and he's been doing it for a long time. And this is something that he can do as long as he wants. It's kind of like with myself. I have no intention of retiring. I just want to do something I enjoy. Pierre, this has been great. If someone wanted to reach out and connect with you, how might they do that?
First of all, if you Google me, you'll find me. www.buyvintagemoney.com. And that's the website that I have. So there's contact information there. You can also, the email address is pierrefricke@buyvintagemoney.com. You'll find some high-tech stuff when you Google me, but you'll find a lot of videos and various things I've done in numismatics, mostly around Confederate paper money, some Union and some old coppers, 1787 things and stuff like that. But if you get to my website, and that's easily found, it's one of the things that come up pretty high, you'll find my contact information, and you can reach me through that. That's probably the best way, is through email.
Well, Pierre, this has been great. I've known your story for a long time, and it's kind of unique, but you've taken something you've always enjoyed and turned it into a nice business. And it's been this ongoing thing.
Yeah, I would say thank you, Mark. I would say, and I can't speak for every hobby, every industry. Right. Some people can jump in and swim, the mile faster than what I did, because I kept maintained a high tech profile for a long time, and that was my number one priority. If I'm working with somebody else, I owe them my first fealty. My wife can handle the customers and make sure we're good there. You've got to think about that kind of stuff when you jump in the water. I was at it a long time, ramping up slower because I enjoyed the high tech world to the point where I'm still considering another thing. But that being said, it's going to be fun. It's going to have to be something I'm passionate about. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to go. It would be unfair to those teams and me to go do something just to get a job. And there's some possibilities. But that being said, we can keep going down this path. And I would just say to people, you got to plan ahead. 45 years old and retirement seems like it's 100 years away. It may be a lot sooner than you think. I would start thinking about, especially if you see age discrimination in your field. And not every field has it, and maybe your company doesn't have it, but look around if you got to get another job and understand that. Because I was at companies that didn't really have it, but I was at companies that earlier on that had it, and I saw it. Don't get in a bubble and think because you're at company XYZ and you haven't 48 years old or 53 years old, you can keep going, because they could be bought out. A lot of things can happen. Plan ahead and then ramp up at the best you can and seek out mentors and people to help you, because they will. The people will help you.
Yeah, I think those are all really good advice. And the fact is there is no stable jobs anymore.
Yeah, you got to plan something, and you can maintain your technical skills if you're in a technical field or whatever and roll. But, sooner or later, you might find yourself on the wrong, your expertise all of a sudden got obsoleted by something else. And that can happen within a year.
Yeah.
1 year you're booming and the next year you're busted. So those are things to consider.
Well, Pierre, this has been great. Thank you very much for being on the Repurpose Your Career podcast.
Thank you, Mark, for having me.
Pierre has been very proactive in managing his career. He knew that his run in tech would probably come to an end someday, and had his vintage money business going on the side for decades. He kept the business going because he enjoyed it from an intellectual, social, and financial aspect. I want you to give some thought on how you might do the same. Take a moment, go to careerpivot.com, sign up for a weekly Career Pivot Insights newsletter, which is sent out every Sunday. You'll get a weekly update on the podcast, white papers, and new blog posts. While there, don't forget to check out the Career Pivot community, which can be found at careerpivot.com/community. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Look for Career Pivot on Facebook and LinkedIn. You'll also find me on Twitter at Career Pivot. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of the Repurpose Your Career podcast. You will find all the show notes at careerpivot.com/episode-244. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podbeam, Overcast, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, and lots of other places where podcasts can be found. In fact, this podcast can be found on the Repurpose Your Career podcast channel on YouTube. Hope to see you next Monday for another episode of Repurpose Your Career podcast.